The snowstorm raged outside, its howling winds battering the small cabin nestled deep within the jagged peaks of an isolated mountain range. Inside, the fire crackled weakly in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls. The man who called this place home sat on a worn-out armchair, staring at his two unexpected guests with a mix of bewilderment and resignation. He was Royce Delaney, a rugged loner who had chosen solitude over society years ago. His life revolved around survival, chopping wood, hunting game, and keeping warm during winters that seemed to stretch endlessly. But now, everything had changed. Two alien women, identical twins from another world, had appeared out of nowhere during one of the worst storms in decades. They claimed they were lost, stranded far from their home planet, and needed shelter until they could figure out what to do next. Royce wasn't sure whether he should laugh or scream. When he first saw them stumbling through the blizzard, their strange outfits glowing faintly under the moonlight, he thought they were hallucinations brought on by too much isolation. Yet here they were, sitting cross-legged on his threadbare rug, sipping tea he'd made for them while explaining their predicament in halting but earnest English. "We are lost, human," one of them said again, her voice soft yet firm. Her name was Trella, as she introduced herself earlier. She wore her long silver hair braided down her back, and her violet eyes sparkled like amethysts even in the dim light. Her sister, Kaylee, mirrored her appearance almost perfectly, except for a tiny scar above her left eyebrow, a detail Royce noticed only after hours of observation. Kaylee leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped tightly around the steaming mug. "We mean no harm," she added, glancing at him with an expression that wavered between curiosity and guilt. "But we cannot return. Not yet." Royce sighed deeply, running a hand through his unkempt beard. He didn't know much about aliens beyond sci-fi movies and conspiracy theories, but these two didn't seem dangerous, at least, not intentionally so. Still, there was something unnerving about their presence. It wasn't just their otherworldly looks or the way their voices carried an odd resonance. It was the fact that they refused to leave. Every time he hinted at them finding somewhere else to stay, they exchanged knowing glances and simply ignored him. They acted as if his cabin was already theirs, rearranging his belongings without permission and cooking meals using ingredients he hadn't realized he still had. At first, it infuriated him. Now, though, he found himself oddly amused despite himself. "Do you even understand what temporary means?" Royce muttered under his breath, earning a smirk from Trella. "Oh, we understand quite well," she replied smoothly, tilting her head. "But temporary arrangements often become permanent when circumstances demand it." "Circumstances?" Royce echoed incredulously. "What circumstances? You've got legs, don't you? And I'm pretty sure those weird suits of yours can handle sub-zero temperatures better than I can." Trella's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "It is complicated." Complicated indeed. Over the past few days, Royce had learned snippets of their story, enough to piece together that their ship had malfunctioned mid-journey, leaving them stranded on Earth. Their technology, advanced as it might be, couldn't repair itself without specific resources they lacked. And apparently, staying close to a human host, specifically him, was crucial for some reason they wouldn't fully explain. "It's like having roommates from hell," Royce grumbled later that night as he paced the cramped confines of his bedroom. Through the thin walls, he could hear Trella and Kaylee whispering softly in their native tongue, a melodic language that sounded like wind chimes clinking against each other. He flopped onto his bed, staring up at the ceiling. Roommates who won't pay rent or follow basic house rules. Despite his irritation, Royce couldn't deny that their arrival had disrupted the monotony of his solitary existence. For years, his days blended together in a blur of routine, broken only by occasional visits from wildlife or the rare traveler passing through. Now, every moment felt charged with unpredictability. Whether it was Kaylee accidentally setting off the smoke alarm while trying to bake something unidentifiable or Trella attempting to teach him phrases in their language, Zyvar apparently meant thank you, though Royce kept forgetting, life had become anything but dull. One particularly chaotic morning, Royce woke up to find the twins dismantling his old radio. Tools were scattered across the kitchen table, and wires dangled precariously from the device's gutted interior. "What the hell are you doing?" he exclaimed, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Kaylee glanced up, unfazed by his tone. "Repurposing materials," she explained cheerfully. Your communication devices are primitive, but the components may help us stabilize our energy signatures. My what? Royce blinked, bewildered. That thing barely picked up AM stations. Exactly why it needs improvement, Trella chimed in, holding up a circuit board as if it were a prized artifact. Do not worry, human. We will restore functionality once our task is complete. Royce groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. You're going to owe me a new radio when this is all over. To his surprise, both women burst into laughter, the sound light and musical. It was the first time he'd heard genuine amusement from them, and it caught him off guard. There was something disarmingly human about their reaction, despite their alien origins. As the days passed, Royce began to notice subtle changes, not just in his surroundings but within himself. The constant chatter and antics of his unwelcome guests forced him out of his comfort zone, challenging habits he hadn't realized had grown stale. He started venturing farther from the cabin, braving the icy wilderness to gather supplies they claimed were necessary for their repairs. Though skeptical, he complied, partly out of curiosity and partly because their determination was impossible to ignore. On one such trip, Royce returned to find the cabin eerily quiet. No glowing tools littered the tables. No melodic whispers filled the air. Concerned, he dropped his pack by the door and called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" A muffled thud came from upstairs, followed by hurried footsteps. Moments later, Trella appeared at the top of the staircase, her face pale and drawn. "Royce," she said urgently, "we have a problem." Before he could ask what kind of problem, Kaylee emerged behind her sister, clutching a metallic object that pulsed with an ominous blue light. "Someone or something is tracking us," she whispered, her usual confidence wavering. "And they are closer than we anticipated." Royce felt a chill run down his spine, colder than any winter breeze. "Tracking you? Who?" "That is what we must determine," Trella replied grimly. "But whoever they are, they pose a threat, not only to us but potentially to you as well." Royce stared at them, his mind racing. Up until now, their presence had been bizarre but relatively harmless. This revelation, however, painted a far darker picture. If danger was heading his way, he needed answers, and fast. "What exactly did you bring into my life?" For the first time since their arrival, Trella and Kaylee hesitated, exchanging a glance heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Kaylee stepped forward, her violet eyes meeting his with unwavering resolve. "The truth," she said quietly, "is more complicated than you realize. And once you hear it, there will be no turning back." Outside, the storm intensified, its fury mirroring the turmoil brewing inside the cabin. Whatever secrets the twins were hiding, Royce knew one thing for certain. His quiet, predictable life was gone forever. The following evening, Royce sat hunched over the dining table, a cup of lukewarm coffee cradled in his hands. Across from him, Trella and Kaylee perched side by side, their expressions unusually somber. The cheerful banter and playful chaos that had marked their earlier days in his cabin seemed distant now, replaced by an oppressive weight of urgency. "So," Royce began, breaking the silence, "you're saying someone's looking for you. Why?" Trella exhaled sharply, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the tabletop. "It's not just someone. It's our government, the Council of Zivaris. They monitor all interstellar travel, ensuring compliance with strict regulations. Our departure, it was unauthorized." Kaylee picked up where her sister left off, her voice low and measured. "We fled because we had no choice. Staying would have meant imprisonment, or worse. But now, it seems they've tracked our signal here." Royce frowned, leaning back in his chair. "Hold on. You're telling me your people have space cops or whatever, and they're coming to drag you back? That doesn't make sense. Why come all the way to Earth just for 2 runaway aliens?" "It's not just about us," Trella interjected, her tone sharp with frustration. "Our escape involved accessing classified information, data that could destabilize entire systems if misused. The Council fears we'll share it with others, especially humans." "Wait, wait, wait." Royce held up a hand, shaking his head. "Share what? What kind of data are we talking about?" Kaylee hesitated, glancing at her sister before answering. Technology. Advanced propulsion systems, energy manipulation techniques, bioengineering breakthroughs. Things that could accelerate human development, or destroy you. Royce let out a bitter laugh, setting his mug down with a thud. Great. So not only am I harboring fugitives, but I'm also sitting on some cosmic secret weapon? Fantastic. It's not a joke, Royce, Trella snapped, her violet eyes flashing. If the Council finds us, they won't hesitate to eliminate any threats, including you. The gravity of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Until now, Royce had treated the twins' plight as a bizarre inconvenience, an amusing disruption to his otherwise mundane existence. But the reality was far darker. These weren't just quirky extraterrestrial visitors. They were refugees fleeing persecution, carrying knowledge powerful enough to attract deadly attention. And let me guess, Royce said dryly, you expect me to help you fight off your intergalactic bounty hunters? Trella opened her mouth to respond, but Kaylee cut her off. Not fight, necessarily. Survive. Evade. Find a way to repair our vessel and leave before they arrive. Leave. Royce echoed, raising an eyebrow. Funny how that keeps coming up. Except every time I suggest it, you act like moving out is optional. This planet isn't safe for us either, Trella countered, her voice tinged with exasperation. Your atmosphere interferes with our cloaking tech, making us easier to detect. Without proper shielding, we're exposed. Exposed, Royce repeated, rubbing his temples. Yeah, sounds about right. My cozy little cabin has turned into a galactic hotspot. Despite his sarcasm, Royce couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. The thought of hostile forces descending upon his remote sanctuary filled him with dread. He'd spent years avoiding trouble, retreating to the mountains to escape the chaos of civilization. Now, it seemed trouble had found him anyway, in the form of two stubborn aliens and their baggage of interstellar politics. Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly to prepare for the unknown. Trella and Kaylee scavenged parts from Royce's old machinery, piecing together makeshift tools to enhance their damaged equipment. Meanwhile, Royce ventured deeper into the wilderness, searching for materials they claimed were essential for constructing a shield generator. One afternoon, as he trudged through knee-deep snow, Royce couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of his situation. Here he was, a middle-aged recluse with no scientific background, helping alien twins fend off potential invaders. Part of him wanted to laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. Another part, a growing part, felt strangely alive, as if the universe had finally decided to acknowledge his existence after decades of ignoring him. When he returned to the cabin that evening, dragging a sled loaded with crystals and metallic ores, he found Trella crouched by the fireplace, tinkering with a device that hummed faintly. Kaylee stood nearby, sketching diagrams on a scrap of paper. "Anything interesting happen while I was gone?" Royce asked, brushing frost from his coat. Trella glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Actually, yes. We detected another signal, an anomaly near the eastern ridge. It's faint, but consistent." Royce froze, his heart skipping a beat. "Anomaly? Like your council buddies?" Kaylee shook her head, frowning. "Impossible to say. Could be natural interference, or it could be something else entirely. Either way, we need to investigate." "Investigate?" Royce echoed, incredulous. "In case you haven't noticed, it's freezing out there, and I'm not exactly equipped for covert ops." "You won't go alone," Trella assured him, standing up and brushing soot from her hands. "We'll accompany you. Besides, you know the terrain better than we do." Royce groaned, sinking into a chair. "Of course I will. Because nothing says, safe plan, like wandering into the wilderness during a snowstorm with two aliens who might accidentally vaporize me." To his surprise, both women chuckled, their laughter cutting through the tension like sunlight breaking through clouds. Even in the face of uncertainty, their resilience was infectious. Royce found himself smiling despite himself. The journey to the eastern ridge proved grueling. The snowstorm showed no signs of relenting, and the biting wind cut through layers of clothing like knives. Royce led the way, his boots crunching through packed snow as Trella and Kaylee followed closely behind, their glowing suits providing faint illumination in the darkness. At one point, Royce stumbled into a hidden crevasse, catching himself just in time to avoid plunging into the abyss below. Heart pounding, he scrambled back onto solid ground, only to find Trella offering him a steadying hand. "You're lucky," she remarked, her tone teasing despite the gravity of the moment. "Falling to your death would ruin our plans." "Glad to know I'm indispensable," Royce shot back, accepting her help. "Though I'm starting to think this whole adventure was a terrible idea." Kaylee chuckled softly, adjusting the strap of the device slung over her shoulder. Too late to turn back now. After hours of treacherous climbing, they reached the ridge. The signal source lay ahead, obscured by swirling snowflakes and jagged rocks. As they approached cautiously, Royce noticed a faint glow emanating from a cluster of boulders. It pulsed rhythmically, almost hypnotic in its intensity. "What is that?" he whispered, his breath visible in the frigid air. Trella raised a hand, signaling for silence. She and Kaylee exchanged a glance before advancing slowly, their movements deliberate and cautious. Royce trailed behind, gripping a flashlight tightly as his pulse quickened. Reaching the source, they discovered a crystalline structure embedded in the rock. Its surface shimmered with iridescent hues, refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. Trella knelt beside it, running her fingers lightly over its edges. "It's a beacon," she murmured, awe evident in her voice. "But not ours." "Whose, then?" Royce asked, peering over her shoulder. Kaylee frowned, scanning the horizon. "Unknown. But whoever placed it here intended to send a message." Before anyone could respond, a loud crack echoed through the valley. The ground trembled beneath their feet, sending shards of ice cascading down the mountainside. Instinctively, Royce grabbed Trella's arm, pulling her away from the edge as Kaylee activated a protective field around them. From the shadows emerged a figure, or rather, multiple figures. Clad in sleek black armor that blended seamlessly with the night, they moved with predatory grace, surrounding the trio in seconds. "Council enforcers," Trella hissed, her voice tight with fear. "No," Kaylee corrected, her eyes narrowing. "Mercenaries. Bounty hunters." Royce swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. "Well," he muttered under his breath, "this just got a whole lot worse." The mercenaries closed in, their weapons trained on the group. One of them stepped forward, his helmet visor reflecting the eerie glow of the beacon. His voice, distorted by a modulator, boomed through the storm. "Surrender the data, and perhaps we'll let the human live." Trella straightened, her expression fierce. "You'll get nothing from us." Royce glanced at her, then at Kaylee, whose hands hovered near the controls of her device. Despite the odds stacked against them, neither woman showed any sign of backing down. For the first time, Royce realized the depth of their courage, and the lengths they were willing to go to protect their freedom. "Guess we're doing this the hard way," he muttered, tightening his grip on the flashlight. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" Trella asked, her gaze never leaving the mercenaries. "If we survive, remind me never to complain about boring days again." Her lips twitched into a brief smile before she turned her attention back to the impending confrontation. The storm raged on, masking the sounds of battle as the trio prepared to face their adversaries head-on. The standoff was electric, the air thick with tension as snow swirled violently around them. Royce's breath came in short bursts, his fingers numb from the cold despite the gloves he wore. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, absurdly aware of how pathetic it felt compared to the sleek, menacing weapons pointed at them by the mercenaries. Trella and Kaylee, however, exuded a quiet confidence that bordered on defiance. Their violet eyes glimmered with resolve, their bodies poised like coiled springs ready to strike. Whatever fear they might have felt, they didn't show it, not to their enemies, and certainly not to Royce. "Last chance," the lead mercenary growled, his voice distorted through the helmet's modulator. "Hand over the data, or we'll take it by force." Kaylee tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but edged with mockery. "You assume we'd let you get close enough to try." Before the mercenary could respond, Trella acted. With a swift motion, she activated a device strapped to her wrist, a small orb that emitted a blinding flash of light. The mercenaries recoiled, momentarily disoriented, giving the trio precious seconds to move. "Go!" Trella shouted, shoving Royce toward the ridge's edge where the terrain sloped downward. Kaylee followed closely, her hands flying over the controls of her shield generator to expand its radius. Royce stumbled forward, sliding down the icy slope as chunks of snow and rock tumbled past him. Behind him, shouts erupted from the mercenaries, who were regrouping faster than anticipated. Blasts of energy sizzled through the air, narrowly missing Royce as he scrambled for cover behind an outcrop of boulders. "Keep moving!" Kaylee called out, her voice strained as she adjusted the shield to keep up with their descent. "We can't hold this position forever." Trella joined them moments later, her movements graceful even in the chaos. She crouched beside Royce, her glowing suit casting eerie shadows against the rocks. "There's a cave system below us," she said urgently. "If we can reach it, we can lose them." "A cave," Royce echoed, incredulous. "In case you forgot, caves are dark, freezing, and full of things that want to eat you." "Better than being vaporized," Trella shot back, her tone sharp but not unkind. Without waiting for further argument, she grabbed his arm and pulled him upright. "Trust me, human." Royce hesitated only briefly before nodding. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, especially to aliens who had turned his life upside down. But in that moment, staring into Trella's determined eyes, he realized he had little choice. Together, the three of them plunged deeper into the storm, dodging blasts of energy and fighting against the treacherous incline. The entrance to the cave loomed ahead, a jagged maw carved into the mountainside. Snowdrifts partially obscured it, making it nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Trella led the way, her glowing suit illuminating the narrow passage as they slipped inside. Once within, Kaylee deactivated the shield generator, conserving its power for later use. The temperature plummeted immediately, the damp chill seeping through their layers of clothing. Royce hugged himself tightly, his teeth chattering as he squinted into the darkness. "This is insane," he muttered, his voice echoing softly off the walls. "What's next?" "Bats." "Worse," Trella replied dryly, scanning the cavern with what appeared to be a handheld scanner. "This area is unstable. Avalanches happen frequently here." "Fantastic," Royce groaned, leaning against the rough stone wall. "So we're hiding in a death trap. Just another day in paradise." Kaylee ignored his sarcasm, focusing instead on setting up a makeshift barrier near the entrance. Using debris and fragments of crystalline material they'd scavenged earlier, she constructed a rudimentary shield designed to mask their presence from scans. It wouldn't hold indefinitely, but it would buy them time. Meanwhile, Trella continued her analysis of the cave, occasionally murmuring coordinates under her breath. After several minutes, she turned to face the others, her expression grim. "There's a secondary exit about 2 kilometers deeper," she explained. "It leads to a valley on the other side of the mountain. If we can reach it, we might stand a chance of evading pursuit." "And if we don't?" Royce asked, folding his arms across his chest. Trella hesitated, then met his gaze squarely. "Then we fight." Her words hung heavy in the silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of the storm outside. For all their technological prowess and alien resilience, Trella and Kaylee were outnumbered and outgunned. Royce knew deep down that their chances of survival weren't great, but neither woman showed any sign of backing down. "Well," Royce said finally, forcing a wry smile, "at least I won't die bored." The journey through the cave was grueling. The path twisted and turned unpredictably, narrowing at points until they had to crawl on hands and knees. Stalactites dripped icy water onto their heads, and the faint scent of sulfur lingered in the air. Every sound, the drip of moisture, the scrape of boots against stone, seemed amplified in the oppressive darkness. Royce lagged behind, his muscles aching and his lungs burning from exertion. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't match the twins' stamina. They moved with an almost supernatural efficiency, their glowing suits casting just enough light to guide the way without attracting unwanted attention. At one point, Royce tripped over a loose rock, landing hard on his knees. Pain shot through his legs, and he cursed under his breath as he struggled to stand. "You okay?" Kaylee asked, doubling back to help him. "Peachy," Royce grumbled, wincing as he tested his weight on his injured leg. "Just add this to the list of reasons why today sucks." Kaylee offered him a sympathetic smile, though her violet eyes betrayed a flicker of amusement. "You humans are surprisingly resilient. Most species would have collapsed by now." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Royce replied sarcastically, leaning on her shoulder for support. "Next time, remind me to bring knee pads." They pressed onward, the tunnel gradually widening as they approached the secondary exit. Trella took the lead again, her scanner beeping intermittently as she confirmed their location. When they finally emerged into the open air, the sight that greeted them was both breathtaking and daunting. The valley stretched out below them, blanketed in pristine snow under a starlit sky. The storm had begun to subside, leaving behind an eerie stillness. In the distance, faint lights twinkled, an isolated settlement nestled at the base of the mountain. "That's our destination," Trella whispered, pointing toward the lights. "If we can reach it, we may find resources to repair our vessel." "And avoid the bounty hunters," Kaylee added, her tone cautious. "But we need to move quickly. They'll be searching for us soon." Royce nodded, steeling himself for the final leg of their journey. His body ached, his mind raced with doubts, and yet a strange sense of determination buoyed him. These women had dragged him into a mess far beyond anything he'd ever imagined, but they'd also shown him courage, ingenuity, and loyalty. If nothing else, he owed it to them to see this through. As they began their descent into the valley, Royce glanced at Trella and Kaylee, their glowing forms stark against the snowy landscape. "Just so we're clear," he said, his voice tinged with humor, "if we survive this, you're buying me a new radio. And maybe a lifetime supply of coffee." Trella smirked, her violet eyes sparkling with mischief. "Deal. But only if you promise to stop complaining about your boring days." Royce chuckled, shaking his head. "Fair enough." The trio trudged onward, their footsteps crunching softly in the snow. Above them, the stars shimmered brightly, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath their watchful gaze. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the universe, forces far greater than Royce could comprehend were converging, and whether they succeeded or failed, one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The descent into the valley was slower than anticipated. The snow, though less dense here, concealed treacherous patches of ice that threatened to send them tumbling at every step. Royce's injured leg throbbed with each movement, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward, refusing to slow the group down further. Trella and Kaylee remained vigilant, their glowing suits casting an ethereal light over the landscape. They scanned the horizon constantly, searching for any sign of pursuit. So far, the mercenaries hadn't appeared, but both women knew better than to let their guard down. As they approached the settlement, its outline became clearer. A cluster of wooden cabins surrounded by a low fence, it looked like a remote outpost meant for researchers or miners. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and faint voices carried on the wind. It wasn't much, but it offered hope, a chance to rest, regroup, and perhaps find what they needed to repair their vessel. "Stay close," Trella murmured as they neared the perimeter. "We don't know who's inside." Royce nodded, gripping the flashlight tightly despite knowing it wouldn't do much against armed mercenaries. Still, it felt better than being completely unarmed. He glanced at Kaylee, who held her shield generator ready, her expression tense but focused. They slipped through the gate quietly, sticking to the shadows as they moved toward the largest cabin in the center of the compound. Light spilled from its windows, accompanied by the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Whoever lived here, they were clearly unworried about visitors, hostile or otherwise. Before they could decide on their next move, a figure emerged from the cabin, bundled in thick winter gear. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, paused mid-step when he spotted them. His hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across his back, but instead of raising it, he squinted curiously. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "You look half-frozen." Royce exchanged a glance with Trella and Kaylee before stepping forward cautiously. "Just travelers caught in the storm," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "We need shelter, and maybe some supplies if you've got extras." The man studied them for a moment longer, then shrugged. "Come on in. Can't leave anyone out in this weather." Relief washed over Royce, though Trella and Kaylee exchanged wary glances. They followed the man into the warmth of the cabin, where a small group of people sat around a table playing cards. The room smelled of roasted meat and wood smoke, a comforting contrast to the biting cold outside. Introductions were brief. The man introduced himself as Lars, the overseer of the outpost. He explained that they were surveyors mapping mineral deposits in the region. When Royce mentioned needing tools and materials, Lars nodded thoughtfully. "We might have something useful," he said. "But fair warning, it won't come cheap." Trella stepped forward, her violet eyes locking onto Lars's. "We'll pay whatever price you ask. This matter is urgent." Her tone left no room for negotiation. Lars raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he led them to a storage shed filled with equipment and spare parts. As Trella and Kaylee began sorting through the items, Royce hung back, watching silently. Lars joined him after a while, leaning against the doorway with a mug of steaming tea. "Your friends aren't from around here, are they?" Royce hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Let's just say they're unique." Lars chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Unique is one way to put it. I've seen a lot of strange things in these mountains, but those two take the cake." "They're good people," Royce said firmly, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "And they're in trouble. Big trouble." Lars nodded slowly, his expression softening. "If there's anything I can do to help, just say the word." By morning, Trella and Kaylee had gathered everything they needed. With Lars's assistance, they managed to assemble a rudimentary cloaking device capable of masking their presence from scans. It wasn't perfect, but it would suffice until they could reach their ship. As they prepared to leave, Lars handed Royce a thermos filled with hot coffee. "For the road," he said with a grin. "And good luck. You're going to need it." Royce accepted the gesture gratefully, shaking Lars's hand. "Thanks. For everything." The trio set off toward the mountain pass where their damaged vessel lay hidden. The journey was arduous, but the adrenaline of nearing their goal kept them moving. When they finally reached the clearing, the sight of the sleek, silver craft brought a wave of relief and apprehension. "This is it," Trella said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "Once we fix the engine, we'll be able to leave. And once you leave, I go back to my boring life, right?" Royce asked, trying to mask the bittersweet feeling rising in his chest. Kaylee smiled gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done more for us than we could ever repay, Royce. We'll never forget you." Trella added, "Nor will we forget the lessons you've taught us about resilience and humor." Royce chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "Yeah, well, don't mention it. Just promise me you won't crash land on Earth again anytime soon." Both women laughed, the sound warm and genuine. For a moment, it felt like old times, their chaotic yet oddly endearing dynamic intact despite everything they'd been through. As Trella and Kaylee worked on repairing the ship, Royce stood nearby, gazing up at the stars. The vastness of the universe stretched endlessly above him, filled with mysteries he'd only begun to glimpse. And while part of him longed for the simplicity of his former life, another part, a growing part, felt grateful for the adventure that had changed him forever. Finally, the twins announced that the repairs were complete. They turned to face Royce, their expressions a mix of gratitude and sadness. "It's time," Trella said quietly. "Thank you, Royce. For everything." Royce nodded, forcing a smile. "Take care of yourselves out there. And if you ever feel like visiting." Kaylee grinned mischievously. "We'll bring coffee next time." With that, they boarded the ship, the hatch sealing shut behind them. Moments later, the craft hummed to life, its engines glowing brightly as it lifted off the ground. Royce watched until it disappeared into the night sky, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. For a long while, he simply stood there, staring upward. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and began the trek back to his cabin. Life might return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such an experience, but Royce knew one thing for certain: he'd never see the world, or himself, the same way again. As he trudged through the snow, he couldn't help but laugh softly. "Aliens," he muttered under his breath. What a story. And with that, Royce Delaney walked home, ready to face whatever came next, with a little more courage, a lot more curiosity, and a newfound appreciation for the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary.